Hi, hello, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm talking with Caelan J. We are talking about self-publishing and her experiences with it and finding the right path to publication, what is right for you. All of my experience, as I always say, comes from traditional publishing. So I thought I'd get someone who'd done it. We talk about it, talk about your experiences, where it started and why you chose self-publishing. Because as I always say, it's right for some people, it's not right for other people. So let's go back to the beginning. When did you first start writing? When did you first start writing, full novels?
Yeah, so I wrote my first book when I was 17. That's when I finished it. So I started it when I was 16. And then, I wrote short stories and stuff before that, but started doing novels when I was a teenager. And that's kind of where I started. And that's also when I started looking into publication and trying to decide like what path. I didn't know there were more than one path at the time. That's when I went to the internet. And so, yeah, that's when I started writing and kind of when I was looking into publishing. So.
Okay, so you didn't consider traditional publishing at that point?
Well, I didn't know anything about it. And when I was doing my research.
If you don't know, you don't know. It's what you find.
Yes. And unfortunately, what I was kind of finding was a lot of not necessarily, unfortunately, but just a lot of self-published authors giving their take on whether or not you should do self-publishing versus traditional publishing. And so there was just a lot of things that were just not true about it, like that your editor has complete and full creative control and you lose it and they can turn your book into whatever they want, and just very things that are not necessarily true.
So this is what interests me, these some of the myths. So what other myths did you hear about traditional publishing then?
So this one's sort of a myth, but one of them was talking about how they had a friend who published a book and the traditional publisher had put an extremely feminine cover on it and they felt like it should appeal to all genders. And they were like, oh, they're cutting out half my audience, like my book's not what they're saying it is. And that it was that was the reason that their book wasn't doing well or something. But I think that from what I've done research, and I think it depends on, there's so many factors, but most publishers make their money because they know the market. And so, they are experts. And so I think, you might not get a cover that you like, but it's not that the publishers have no idea what they're doing when it comes to marketing, and that you could do so much better on your own. And so you should definitely not trust them in any way. Another one that's kind of a myth, but like also can be true if you look at it, it's all about like bias, right? And so just about how you get really, really small royalty on your traditional books, like 7 to 10 or 11%. I don't know for certain, and then you get 70% on the self-publishing side. And so you get way more money, and yeah, you have to front the cost yourself, but you get way more money. And so it's totally worth it. And I just thought that was interesting because with self-publishing, you definitely price your books lower because that's pretty standard for ebooks, between like $3 and $5. If you price it any higher than that, it kind of raises eyebrows. And so when you're looking at that 70%, you're still only looking at, like, if your book's $3, somewhere around $2. And from the people I've talked to that have traditional deals, like if they get like 10% on the cover of their hardback, like $20 or something, like you're looking at a similar royalty on your ebooks and your hardbacks, which is, you sell more ebooks as a self-published author, and your paperback is even lower because the printing costs can get pretty high, especially if you've got a larger book. And so you're only getting 70% off the top of the printing costs and then how much you charge. And you also can't charge a lot because it's just part of the industry to not be as expensive. And so you're going to get an even smaller royalty on your paperbacks. And so I just thought that was interesting that a lot of people try to be like, you can make way more money self-publishing, and you can make good money self-publishing. There are ways to do that, but I don't think necessarily looking right at the royalties, it's quite that black and white of if you're going to make, because it sounds like so much more money, but it really isn't if you look at it.
So paperback typically, well, this varies again, but paperback for traditional publishing could be anywhere between 10 and 15%, and hardback could be like 12 to 16% or something. And if it's a $20 book and you say you got, say it was 10%, then you know exactly what you're getting, but it's 10% of the cover price. So even if a shop sells it for like 17 bucks, you're still getting 10% of the 20 bucks. But this is where the balance comes in, you see, because if you sell 5,000 copies of your hardback traditionally published and you get 10% of that versus 500 self-published and you get 70% of that, are you doing it because you want, but then you've already paid out a chunk of money to make that self-published book. Whereas a traditional publish, I'm paid a penny. I'm giving anybody anything until I get my advance, and then I give a percentage to my agent. So
right, but nothing coming straight out of pocket, which
no.
Yeah, I think that's another thing that I didn't quite understand how expensive it is. I definitely knew that I needed to save up for an editor and for a good cover, but I just think there's so many costs that maybe aren't always talked about. And there are some great people out there that break down like what they spent, and that's really helpful. But some people don't want to talk about that because they're uncomfortable talking about money. But just things like proof copies, like I spent so much money on proof copies. Like I think I have a stack like $7 just proof copies of my first book, because there was some issues with formatting, and I did pay for formatting, but I had to format twice, and then I ended up reformatting myself and then formatting the second book myself, and so that took a lot of hours and proof copies. And then marketing gets expensive, and just so many things, the costs that aren't always talked about. It's not just your editing and your cover, like there's so many other things that kind of go into it, and it adds up very quickly.
So when you'd finished that first book and you decided you're going to self-publish it, what did you do next? Did you go on YouTube for advice?
Yeah, I had been looking into it for like a long time, like reading a lot of things and talking to people that have done it. And I was starting to get into the community on Instagram of a lot of indie authors. And so there were people that were doing it, and I was able to kind of talk to them about their experience and get references for people to hire for like cover art and editing and formatting and all of that, and character art. I did some of that for some promotion. And so, yeah, I just kind of relied on talking to the people that had done it and just doing as much research as I could. And that's kind of how I formed my plan, which I think was pretty solid, but there were definitely some things that I didn't understand completely about self-publishing, that I just wasn't exposed to that information, even though I was digging for it. And so things that you just have to learn by experience that are just you can't really prepare for always. So yeah, that's when, sorry, I lost my train of thought. So yeah, I wrote the first book, and then I searched out for an editor. I found one that I thought would be good. She did a sample edit on it. It looked good, so I sent it off to her. And then I wrote the second book, and the third book, I was told that fast releasing is a really great way to make it into self-publishing. You know, if you can publish multiple books a year, it's less likely that your audience is going to forget about you. You might not be able to reach them the second time around, and said they can just pre-order the next one right after they finish that one, or buy right into it like as soon as they finish it. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm writing a trilogy. I'll write all of them, and then I'll release them in 3 months. Great plan.
Wow,
so I was
it's intense.
so I was trying to write fast, which I'm a fast writer, but it's a lot. I wrote the second book in like 3 months, and then I wrote the third book in like 2.5 months at 140,000 words. And during that time, I'm trying to like really work on my Instagram, because another thing I was told is that you need to build up a social media platform and engage with a community and build in an audience and build those parasocial relationships. And that's how you're going to sell your books, is through having a social media platform and then launching your book off of that platform. And so I was working really hard at my Instagram, and it's just, anyone who does social media knows it's really slow to grow, and it takes a lot of work to not always get a lot back from it. And so that was taking up a lot of time while I was writing. So I was kind of doing this thing where I'd send my books off to my editors, and then I'd work on the next one, and then they send it to critique partners and beta readers and all that. And then once I finished my third book is when I decided to start my marketing plan for my first book, which was a little bit rushed, because I wanted to have all 3 books done, but I was running out of steam when it came to my Instagram. And I was just like, I don't think I can keep this momentum up much longer. And I know that if you kind of take a break or you step back, like the algorithm isn't always favorable to you when you do that. And so it can be hard to get that momentum back. So I was like, well, I should publish while I have this momentum, where I'm growing steadily, where I am having good relationships with people and good dialogue. And so, I started working on my marketing plan. And because I was smaller, I was like, okay, I need to overcompensate with really hard-hitting marketing and just be really sharp on that. And so I did ARC reviewers and street team. I did a whole street team, and I did worked with a tour company to do like a big cover reveal and to do like a 7-day tour all on Instagram, and just all kinds of things. I did giveaways, and just there was a lot. I can't even remember it at this point. There was so much. Oh, I commissioned character art, and then I was sending those out to or to my street team members and for giveaways in like aged envelopes with wax seals. And so I was just trying really hard to have like a really strong brand that, you know, people would be partial to, and hopefully make them like me and my brand and my image so they would buy my book, because that's kind of what I was told is the best way to go about it. And so as I got
paid
closer,
for all of that as well, though. You've had to,
sorry,
you put all of this time and all this money into all of this. That's not doing all that's not going to be cheap, in addition to the editing and everything else.
Yeah, it gets very expensive very quickly. And yeah, so just all those little things, like I was saying, add up, and I forget about them until we talk about them. I'm like, oh yeah, that costed money. And then, so as I was getting closer to publication, between when my cover reveal and release day, I started getting like quite a bit of buzz in my little corner of Instagram, like more than I was expecting, because I tried to temper my expectations, and which I think is good. Like when you're self-publishing and it's your first book, like you're probably not going to get like skyrocketing amazing sales. Like it's definitely a long game, and it's definitely a volume game. You have to put a lot of time and put your years in and get a backlist going. And so I was trying to like temper my expectations, but I just started having people saying things like about my book that had been early readers, like, oh, this is in my top 10 favorite books, or, you know, just saying it was their favorite book since they read A Song of Ice and Fire. And I was like, don't put my name in the same sentence as George R. R. Martin, please. That's not okay. And just things I never, ever thought I would hear from readers, like in my wildest dreams. And so it was just hard to be like, well, maybe I'll sell a few more copies than I originally thought, you know? And so I was just getting all this amazing feedback, and my book posts were getting more engagement than ever, just having so many people being like, I'm so excited for your book, I can't wait to read it, like all these things. And so then on release day, I did a big release party, and I had a bunch of people show up, and I live streamed the whole thing and did a Q&A and a live reading and some more giveaways. And I announced the release date of my second book, which is going to be 2 months later, and put it up for pre-order and everything. And then I went home and checked my sales, and they were honestly laughably low. Like, there was this disconnect when I was looking at my sales from the feedback that I had received online and the actual hard sales numbers. And that was when I was kind of like, this don't match up. And so I kind of was trying to keep up the marketing for that week, because release week's very important. I did get a few more sales, but just nothing super significant. But I mean, it was still a good experience. I don't want to try to discourage anyone from self-publishing. So I can definitely talk about all the great things about it too. But at that point, I was kind of trying to do some more research into traditional publishing, not necessarily because I wanted to switch paths, but because when your job is at a low point, sometimes you look at other jobs to make yourself feel better. And it was actually watching videos like your channel and Alexa Dunn and Michelle Schusterman, and just people that have a lot of experience in traditional publishing, and Brandon Sanderson talking about how, you know, social media doesn't always move the needle, and it doesn't always translate to sales. That kind of clicked for me, that I was like, oh, platform publishing is possible and people are doing it. Yep. But it's a million times harder than I even realized. And a lot of those people that are making a living off platform publishing, they're not making the majority of their money off of their book sales. They have merch stores and Patreon, and maybe they're freelancing editing on the side, or they have AdSense, or so many streams of income that it's not just writing. Which I just wanted to write. I did not want to have to be the entrepreneur, like full-time marketer. And I guess I did not fully understand how intensive it was until I was in it. Yeah. And there's also just this pressure as like an indie author to be as good as traditional publishing, to have your book be as polished and amazing, because it's almost like, if you read a traditionally published book and you see a typo, you're like, oh, that's kind of funny, like that slipped through. I think sometimes, not everybody, you read a self-published book and there's a typo and you're like, oh, that's unfortunate. They clearly did not put in the work, you know? And so you're just trying so hard to not even be as good, but even be better, and like disguise yourself as traditionally published so that that stigma doesn't work against you. So it's so easy to just run yourself into the ground trying to chase that, because traditional publishers have entire teams of people for each aspect of what you're doing all on your own, like sales and marketing and publicity. Like they have so many people to work on that stuff. And when it's just you, like, and you're trying to get to that level, it can be a lot. So that's kind of, sorry to talk
No,
at
it's
you so
fine.
much.
So were you doing this full time, like, during the day and all night, or did you have a job as well?
Yeah, so I work at a tax office, so my job's seasonal. So I work full time during tax season, and
Okay.
then I switched to part time during the year. So I was writing my books while I was working full time, and then my marketing really kicked in once I switched to part time. And so, but it kind of felt like working a part time job and a full time job, because I would get home after like a 4 to 5 hour shift, and then I would just work all day and into the night.
Yeah.
So it just became so many hours, and I think that was another thing that I wasn't expecting after the release date, the kind of like drop that happens after it's published, where it's like, okay, I've been spending 12 hours a day working on these things, and now it's over, and do I have anything to show for it? And I took time away from my family or my friends to do this, and
Yes.
was it really worth it? And just asking yourself those questions. And I think just not being prepared for that as much was kind of difficult. And it took me a minute to kind of pick myself back up and be like, okay, like, what am I doing? Like, how am I moving forward? And all of that.
So you launched the first one. It doesn't go quite as well as you'd hoped, but then you've got book 2 coming in 2 months.
Mhm.
So you just carry on again. Is that what you did?
I
Build
tried.
to the next one.
Yeah, so I was like, okay, like I just have to keep going. Like I'd been running on fumes for like 3 months, but I was like,
Oh,
okay, we can do it. And so I kept trying to go full throttle on release week, and then I told myself I'd step back a little bit afterwards, I give myself a break, and then pick back up to lead up to book 2 release. But I definitely didn't anticipate the burnout that would hit me really hard, and so instead of stepping back, I had to like completely stop. Like I just took a hiatus a little bit and was like, there's no way I'm getting the second book published if I'm trying to do all that marketing at the same time, because
right.
I could barely do it the first time around. And so definitely learned that pacing yourself is important, and just learning how to not do that to yourself. And so I definitely was a little bit more behind on the second book than I wanted to be. But what I've been told about the fast releasing was that if it's a series, hopefully all your marketing that you put into that first book will kind of bleed into your second book, because they'll read it and then they'll be like, oh, I want the second one. And so you shouldn't have to put as much marketing into the later books, which was not necessarily true, because I when I did my release day post, I had tried to do some marketing, but not nearly as much as I did with the first one. And I had people that had loved the first one so much comment and be like, I had no idea this was coming out. Like, I can't believe this is out. Like, no one told me. And they were kind of sad. They were like, I can't believe it's out. And I was like, well, that did not work like I thought it would. And so, yeah, it was kind of hard for me to keep up that pace, and I just couldn't. And then that fast release didn't quite work the way I thought it would.
So did you release it after a couple of months or longer for book 2?
No, I did. I released it. I
Wow,
was up
okay.
till 2 hours till the deadline, like finishing up little formatting things on the ebook and stuff. And so I did get it out on time. I almost was like, maybe I should postpone, but it was the book was ready. It was just like trying to make sure the formatting was on point, because I did it myself. And so I had ordered so many proof copies, and there were just a few things that on the ebook, mostly ebook is tricky, but yeah, so I published that in December, and then I started on edits on the third book, and I've kind of started to get a healthier balance with the Instagram, just kind of being like, okay, I think my goals have shifted a little bit after that experience of what I want out of my publishing career.
Okay.
And so I think that's helped, because like when it comes to self-publishing versus traditionally publishing, like you kind of have to know yourself and like know your personality and what kind of career speed you want to have, and like how many hours you want to put in and what you want from it. And I think I learned that about myself through this process, which is one of the big reasons I don't regret it, was because I learned a lot about what kind of work environment is most productive for me. And and so I definitely had to shift my goals and my definition of success too.
So when did you put out books 1 and 2?
So book 1 came out in October of last year, and then the second book came out in December.
Okay. So you're working on book 3 now, and you're planning
currently.
to put it out soon?
We'll see. I'm on like my 4th or 5th draft right now, and it ended up being a little bit more of a undertaking than I was anticipating. It's just grown into this very complex and interesting like epic fantasy, but there's just so many layers that I'm like, wow, like I'm gonna have to do like 7 drafts on this and then put it through beta readers and critique partners. So I've told myself that it's okay if it doesn't come out till like the start of next year. Like I was thinking January was when I was hoping for, but I learned like don't set release dates until you like have a better idea of, for me, I feel like it has to be to copy editor before I want
Right.
to set the release date. Because you don't want to be you don't know, like if you're going to be making big changes, like maybe you'll send it out to beta readers and they'll be like, oh, there's this giant plot hole. And you'll be like, okay, another 3 drafts, like, here we go. And you don't know what's going to happen in your life too, about how long it's going to take you. Cause that was one of the things I didn't anticipate with my 2nd to 3rd book. Is my 2nd book I wrote in 3 months, and I was able to workshop and get through all the edits very quickly in like another 3 to 4 months. And then when it came to the 3rd book, I drafted it really quickly. And so I was thinking, well, I can probably get that through the edits about the same speed that I did the 2nd book, but it just didn't work out that way. It's just more intensive. And so more things, I don't know, every book's different. So you just kind of can't always bank on how much time it's going to take you to edit.
So do you plan your books then?
I do, yeah. But
Okay.
I kind of outline. I like to outline, but I never stick to it. I'll like come up with a whole plot and all these things, and then it'll like completely change while I'm drafting. And so a lot of times I'll just write myself into random places, and then I'll be like, how am I gonna make this work? And so it's a little bit chaotic, but yeah.
And how many, what's the kind of word count for these books then? How long are they?
So the first book is right around 100,000, which is a little bit longer than I wanted it to be. Originally it was shorter, but then I had to add a whole, it's a whole thing. Anyways, it ended up lengthening a little bit. And then the 2nd book ended up around 115. And I was thinking the 3rd book would be around there too, but it went all the way up to 141,000 words on my draft. So I'm thinking that will cut down a little bit. I don't know how much. But yeah, that's kind of how long they are, which I feel like for a lot of self-publishers, people that are really excelling in the industry, they're writing in like romance, and they're writing these 60 to 80,000 word books, and they're putting out 4 or 5 or 6 a year.
Wow.
And so I think that was something I didn't quite realize too, that I was like, oh, my books are quite a bit longer. And so it's harder to fast release if you're writing longer books. So.
Wow, that's a lot. 100 and, for, as you say, it is slightly longer than some self-published books. Yeah, but fantasy tends to be longer anyway. I mean, YA is about 80,000. It can go up to 100, but it's usually within the 80,000 space. And fantasy, I mean, so Angry Robot, who's my current publisher, they had an open submission window, and I think their sweet spot, they said, was 80 to 120. I think that was the kind of, they said, if you go slightly over, slightly under, that's fine, but that's where the kind of bracket they were looking at, because they predominantly do paperbacks. And so it's cost effective. Once you go over that, I guess the page count goes up and the word count, and then it just kind of gets not as cost effective. But
yeah, and shelf space too, for sure.
Exactly. Yeah. So go on. No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say that. Oh, sorry, I actually lost my train of thought. So
just about shelf space. You're right. Yeah, if they're too big a books, they. So there's a lot there. I'm just kind of trying to pick it through. So one thing.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. It's good. So one thing that's common, that's interesting, is that people have told you that you build up a body of work, and then that carries you through, because that's true with traditional publishing as well. There are some authors that I know who've done fairly well on their first series, and then they've gone on, but they still keep producing work. And then 10 years later, some people are still discovering them now for the first time, even though they've got a body of work. So John Gwynne writes epic fantasy. Do you know, have you heard of John Gwynne?
Yeah.
Okay, so in the last, I'd say 4 years, he's had a massive resurgence. And everyone's like, oh, Malice and Faithful and the Fallen and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, Malice was published in 2013, I think, or 2014. And so he had basically 7 books, and then people are discovering him, burning through them. Now they're reading his new one, number 8, and 9 has just come out. I'm like, yeah, that's 10 years in the making, but he's got this body of work. But if you're doing 2 or 3 books a year, that pace is, how can you keep it up is my question.
I don't know. I have not successfully done it, so I'm not the person to ask. But I don't know. It's crazy because I see other people doing that, and I'm like, I don't understand how this, like, are you like a robot or something? Like, I don't get it. But some people are just, they write really fast. And I think too, the people that are doing that, they're not doing platform publishing. So they're not putting as much time into the marketing as I think maybe I was in that way. Like some of them are just, doing paid advertising and using Amazon to kind of push their books to those voracious readers that will just keep clicking on their next one and their next one. And so they write these 11, 12, 13 book series, and then people just run through them, and it is very lucrative for them. And I'm sure it's different for every person, and so I can't speak for those people, but that's what I've heard a lot of people do. And so I think they're shorter, and they learn to write really quickly and to keep that pace up.
So during all of this, you must have been talking to other self-published authors as well in the community. What were they saying? What were their experiences like?
Yeah, so I think, sorry, I'm stuttering. I don't know that a lot of people talk about that letdown of the first book. So I didn't hear anything similar to my experience until I'd actually published, and I'd sent out a newsletter like a couple months afterwards, kind of explaining my hiatus and just being like, here's where I'm at, And I had a friend reach out to me, and they were just like, I had a very similar experience to you. And they were quite a bit larger than I was. And I was like, oh, maybe this is more common than I think. And so, yeah, I definitely think that first books and like beginning out in self-publishing is just difficult. And I think being prepared for all of those things is really important, and knowing that it is totally a long game. And the more books you get out, the better chances you are to make a living off of it. And it just depends on if that's what you want, because you definitely, it's still a fast pace. You still have to work with Amazon and call them when there's printings wrong on your book, or, you still have to work with editors and hire your own people and all that. So
it's a lot more business. Well, it's a lot more work you do yourself as a self-published author than with traditional. I guess that's the kind of the other balance is, I don't pay money outright, but like the 12% or the money that's going to my agent who does promotion to international sales, the money from my book, I'm not getting the 70% royalties, but the money off that is going to pay for the editor who works at the traditional publisher, the person who does the cover, the proof editor, the copy editor. So that money's going to them, I guess, so but I'm not doing any. You're putting all these extra hours on top, and I'm doing something else, probably writing or having a cup of tea.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing that I realized too, is that your writing time gets cut down so quickly. And when I was young, when I was a teenager, I loved to just write for hours on end. Now I don't quite know how to do that. Like on a Saturday, I'd wake up at 8 and I would write till midnight, and I just would write and write and write. And I could write for hours, and I loved it. And I never wanted to take breaks from it. And so it was interesting when I started having to do all the publishing stuff and the marketing stuff. Like I just did not have time to write. I didn't have time to edit. I didn't have time to do any of that. And I was like, I'm an author and I can't write, and I don't like this. And so I think just knowing that as a self-published author, like there are going to be times where you can't write because there's other things that you have to focus on. So
it's the same to some degree with being traditional published. Like even Brandon Sanderson, when he did his Kickstarter, and he does like his pie chart of how he spent his time, but then he realized, he basically said, I'm going to events, I'm meeting the fans, I love going out and talk to people. And you're like, yeah. And he goes, but that's like a quarter of his time or something, whatever it was. And he goes, okay, I've now got that time back, I can use that to write. Whereas for most traditional publishers, it's okay, a big chunk of that pie chart is going to work and paying the bills and doing getting the money, and then it's family time, and then there's a little sliver that's your writing time somewhere. Like when I was like when I was younger, I do the same as you. I didn't have the same commitments and family. I'd come home from work and I just write from like 6 till midnight, crash out, get up the next day, go to work, and you just keep going. But it's my birthday coming up. I'll be 45. I can't do what I did when I was in my 20s now. I can't do it with the same intensity, and I've got things I have to look after and your commitment. So I can't do it. But I suppose if you're able to write full time, you get daytime writing back, which I don't have anymore.
Yeah, and I definitely think that I'm lucky in that my tax season job is a slow paced job and I can actually write at work. And then when I'm working part-time, like I have my husband and everything. And so I definitely think you can't really talk about self-publishing without talking about privilege and how much time you have and how much money you have and what your partner's doing. And so I definitely think I was in a position where I am able to write in the day and I am able to put more time into it that some other people just don't have. And so, yeah, it's definitely something to think about too when you're choosing your path. And
so were the self-publishers that you were speaking to, were they able to write full time, or do they also have a day job and a bunch of income streams? How
it
did it
just
work for
depended
them?
on who you were talking to. I was friends with a lot of like people that were parents, and so a lot of them were full-time moms juggling their writing is
Yeah.
like probably the majority of people that I was talking to. But some of them were working full-time and doing their writing, and so yeah, it's definitely can be done. I don't know how, but they do it, and so yeah, it's just some people do that.
So do you think when the third book comes out, because I know some people still wait for series to wrap up, do you think you'll get more people suddenly going, oh, I'll read it now because the whole series is done, even though it's self-published? Do you think people will do that?
That would be wonderful. I would hope so. I mean, I don't know for sure. Yeah, I'll definitely try my best to try to, I definitely won't go as hard as I did on the first book, but try to, get the word out about it. And I am hopeful that over time, if I write more things, that people will come back to that series because I am really proud of it. Like I put many hours and years and, time into those books. And I am really proud and excited about the feedback I've gotten from the first book and from the few people that have read the second book. So I definitely want more people to read it. And so I'm hopeful that as I move through my career that people will go back to my old stuff and hopefully read it. So
Absolutely. So once you've done book 3, do you know what you're going to do next? Are you going to continue to self-publish, or are you looking at traditional publishing? What's your plan?
yeah, I'm trying to decide. It
Okay.
depends on the day. Some days, because I have this idea for a spin-off series from my first from the series that I'm working on right now that I think would do really well in self-publishing. It would be an adult book and it would be fantasy, and it was gonna be a long form series, shorter books. That I thought would be really interesting because I could write it so that you could read it without reading the trilogy. But if you read the trilogy, it would feed you into that and vice versa. So I thought that would be a great tactic for self-publishing. And I was thinking I could probably draft all 6 of them in 1 year and then take the next years to like edit them, because I found that fast drafting a whole series for me is best because I'm so chaotic. I always want to go back and add the foreshadowing, and I always have new ideas coming up. And so I was like, oh, I could draft all 6 books and then I could do all these things. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, this is what drove me into the ground in the first place. And so I don't know. I go back and forth with it. And then I also have this other idea for kind of a historical epic fantasy that I guess could maybe be called portal contemporary. It's a whole thing, but I have this idea for this book that I'm really excited about. I'm going to do some cool historical research for, and it's going to be adult as well. That I was kind of working on some pitches for it, and I'm like, oh, this is kind of pitchy. Like I might even try to query this one, and sometimes that is very attractive because I think with the rejection and things I faced as self-publishing, and that's another reason I don't regret it. And I don't think that I don't know. I think that I'd be able to recover from anything traditional publishing would do to me. I'm sure that there would be hard things that I wouldn't expect, but I'm like, if I can bounce back from that, I think I can bounce back from most things that I don't know. I think I'm very emotionally resilient, and so I think it could be a good path for me. And I do like having a full-time job or having a job and writing in my spare time. Obviously, I can write during my job, but I've had other jobs and I like not working for myself. I like working for someone else. And so I think I'm trying to decide what pace is going to be best for me. And also just depends on what I want to write at that time. But I think right now I'm leaning towards writing that adult fantasy and maybe trying to query it and see how that goes and just try it out, because what can it hurt?
So it hasn't put you off self-publishing then? This experience and what you've done hasn't put you off?
No, I
That's
think
good.
it's taught me a lot. And so I think if I did it again, I could not fall into some of the same pitfalls that I did. There are certain mistakes I made that I know I wouldn't make again. And
okay, so what are some of those? These are the kind of what things have you
um,
learned for this next time?
don't write your book, then write 2 more books, and then come back and proofread. Because I wrote my first book and then well, you can do that, but don't be publishing at that time, because I wrote the first book and then I wrote 2 more books, and it was a year later when I was doing my proofreading, and I was like, this is garbage. Like, I cannot publish this. Like, it's terrible. And obviously, like, I'd grown as a writer, and I'm sure people look back at their old works and I was like, I don't like that as much as what I do now. But so then I felt the need to do a quick last line edit on it, and just kind of, because I could see so clearly where some of my mistakes were, and I just need to polish this up a little bit, like coming back to that pressure. But this was like 2 months till release. And so I was doing that, and then I had to reformat, and that costs money. Also, I don't think I would ever pay someone to format again. It's something I kind of learned throughout the process, and that my aunt always tells me is that, like, in business, you can have fast, you can have easy / quality, and you can have cheap, but you can only have 2, and then you can't have all 3. So if you want fast and cheap, it's going to be really expensive, or sorry, fast and cheap, it's going to be not very good quality, and it's going to take a really long time. If you want fast and quality, you're going to pay out the door for it. And like same, like, what is it? Cheap and easy. Yeah. Anyways, you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And so I learned with formatting that I would rather put in that time to learn how to do it. And it took me weeks and lots of YouTube videos and lots of tweaking and lots of proof copies to learn how to do it. But I think I would rather put my money towards different kinds of marketing, like maybe some paid marketing, rather than just putting all my eggs in Instagram, and kind of learning more into that side of things, and then do the formatting myself. So that was something that I learned. Also, just like with marketing in general, just not completely banking on social media to market your books. I think I would switch to more of the tactic. I watched a video by Brandon Sanderson. I don't know if I mentioned this, but he had some romance authors that were doing very well in indie publishing, and they were publishing a bunch of books a year, like 3 or 4 or 5, and then they were investing a lot of their income into Amazon advertising to push their books to those voracious readers that would just rip through their series. And so I think I would probably take that approach more. Right. I would still keep my social media, but I think I would try to fast release all of those books in 1 year, and then just try to do paid advertising along with my social media. So, do
you think when you started working on the books and you got further along, when you look back at the first one, do you think the distance helped you to see what some of the mistakes were? Like,
definitely, yeah.
That's a concern I have with self-publishing, is that in the rush to get the book out and then get the next book out, and then you'd be like, oh, I had a great idea how to do that thing in book 1. You look back and go, oh no, well, it's too late now. I mean,
yeah.
What do you do? Do you take the book down and make change, or do you just have to live with it?
Yeah, I definitely, that's why I probably want to fast track the whole series. And I know some people, I don't know exactly how people keep that pace up over years and years and years, because my kind of thoughts were I was going to take a few years to write the whole series and not publish them until the whole series was done and like ready to go, and then just release them one after another, because that's the only way I can think of releasing that many books in 1 year, is to just write them all beforehand and get them all ready beforehand. And I did notice that with because I'd finished the 3rd book when I went back and read the 1st book, and so it gave me so much perspective with like the pros and things in that time. And I think taking the time between finishing my 3rd book and doing the edits now, because I finished in April of last year and I didn't start on the edits until January. And as much as like I missed being able to write while I was doing all the marketing, that distance has helped me a lot with this book, because I have this thing where I like to bite off more than I can chew, and I have way more perspectives than I probably should have. And so I'm just like, I'm not a good enough writer to pull this off, but I guess we're gonna learn how to be a good enough writer to pull this off. And so that distance, I think, really helped me to see more clearly what exactly I need to do. And so the editing has been really fun, because it's just, I edit and then I'm like, okay, and this is how I'm going to fix this, and this is wrong here, so I can fix it here. And it's just that clarity has been so wonderful. So I didn't used to buy into the advice of give it 6 months, but I totally like, yes, give it 6 months if you can, because it's super great. And that's definitely, I mean, even I've heard from traditional publishing, if you're trying to publish a book a year, sometimes that time isn't even available to you either. So it depends, I'm sure.
You don't get 6 months, no. So I'm trying to work backwards. Yeah, you don't get the time. So I've just done copy edits on my new book. So we're in March now. I did my copy edits start of March. The book comes out in August. So I haven't had 6 months just to kind of sit and think about it. My proof will be here in a couple of weeks or a week's time. And then we start to build up to the PR and the promotion and blogs and advanced reading copies and e-arcs on, all this kind of stuff. So yeah, but at the same time as doing that, I'm writing the next one. So, there's always a constant overlap. I never write more than one book at once, but I'm always writing one book and editing a different book.
Yeah, I think that's similar with self-publishing with my experiences. I'm usually like, I'll be drafting and editing 2 different books a lot of the time, or it'll be with like beta readers and critique partners, and then I'll like pause for a second to like review feedback, and then so it's definitely similar. But sometimes I like look at traditional publishing and I'm just like, they format for you and they do your cover and they have someone else to do the proofreading and the copy edits, and all that stuff is taken care of. Like, that seems bizarre to me. I'm like, that sounds amazing. That's like a dream. And I'm sure it's not a dream for sure, but
it's intense. It's intense.
I think that there's definitely pros and cons to each, and that's why it's important to like look at both sides, and not just look at both sides from 2 different people, but look at people that have had a great experience self-publishing and have loved it and been really successful, and to look at somebody that hasn't had a great experience and maybe changed their path because they didn't enjoy it. And then same with traditional publishing, look at people that have loved it and had a great experience and done great, and people that haven't, and that can give you like a lot of a more real side of what the good things are and what the bad things are that you may face, and help you to evaluate yourself and your book and what's going to be best for you. So
like Mike, Brandon Sanderson, we said he's doing very well. He's now at the point where he's able to kickstart books and do things if he wants. Michael J. Sullivan started off as traditional publishing, built up a huge audience, and now he's gone full-time self-publishing the last few books. But again, because his fan base is there, that he can kickstart a book and he knows they're going to buy the book, and they know him and they know his quality of writing. So it works for him great. A friend of mine, Ben Galley, he's self-published, but all of his books are self-published through Amazon. So then again, he can leverage some of the Amazon things by doing it with them. And, there's benefits. You can make changes and do things a lot that I can't. Like, I can't turn around to my publisher and say, oh, can we put all our books for 99 cents for 2 weeks?
Yeah.
You'd be like, well, not really. We kind of need to plan it and prep. He can just go out and do it, and it's there the next day, and blast emails and social media and telling people. So there's a lot more agility with self-publishing.
Oh, definitely. Like, it was nice to be my own boss in some ways, because it was just the flexibility could be really nice. And if you are a fast writer, having that ability to publish that many books a year, like, I don't know, but I've not heard that happens very often in traditional publishing, where you could publish more than 1 or 2 books a year, if that. No. And so with self-publishing, if you write a lot and you want to publish multiple books a year, you have that option. And there's so many different paths to get to where you want to be. Like, I think that was another thing that I learned with self-publishing, is it's not just, here's the way to self-publish, this is what you should do, here's what you should do for marketing. Like, there's so many paths. And I love what you said about all those authors. They all had a different path to success, and you kind of have to find that path for yourself. So
there is no one path fits all. There's no, and we're getting a lot more hybrid authors now as well. People who are traditionally publishing, who do self-publish, novellas, short stories, or they go into anthologies, or they just do the odd book themselves. So a friend of mine, Steve McHugh, he started self-publishing, but Amazon noticed him and they picked him up for their 47 North, their sort of publishing wing. So he did like 13 books through them, but now he's just self-published his own novella. and then I think he'll probably get another book contract again, but he has an agent and stuff. So it's, it's all very different. It's every time I talk to someone, it's not the same story of how they got to where they are today.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I've heard like, and I mean, I don't know for certain, maybe you can weigh in on this, but a lot of people will say that if you self-publish, you can't move to traditional publishing always. Like you might have to change your name. If your sales aren't good, it might be harder to get a deal. And I've heard so many different things. Some people are like, oh, that's hard. And some agents are like, oh, I don't care. And some are like, no, I really care. And some people are doing great at it. And so it's interesting to see that, like, I don't know if you have a weigh in on that.
So there's a few examples. So there's some people who've done really well in self-publishing, and then that's got them noticed. Mm-hmm. So whether it's Fires of Vengeance by Evan Winter, he self-published that first book himself and wanted to do a book that he wanted to do it for his son, and so he self-published it and it did really, really well. He was then picked up to be traditionally published, and he's got a 4-book series. Book 2 just came out. Mm-hmm. Then you think about Mark Lawrence. So he knew there were a lot of great fantasy books being self-published out there. So he started the SPFBO, Self-Published Fantasy Blog Off. This is where like you send in the name of your book, has to be finished, and then a number of people vote on their favorites. And it starts with 300 and it whittles down to like 1, and they win. But the thing is, when you win, you don't necessarily get like a prize or money, but it's all about throughout this process, people are raising awareness, they're talking about these books, they're blogging about it, they're reviewing it, the finalists all get a lot of attention. And here's the final twist. Several of the winners have then been picked up for traditional publishing deals. However, several of the finalists have been picked up and have done exceptionally well. So Josiah Bancroft, Books of Babel, he was a finalist, I believe. His 4th book just came out, did really, really well. He's done exceptionally well. He's now got his 2nd traditional publishing deal. But a number of other people said, I didn't win, but during the process of entering this competition, it's raised my profile, and now I'm doing much better. I'm staying with self-publishing because that's what I feel comfortable with. And they're like, okay, some people might have been offered a deal and they've gone, no, I want to stay with what I'm doing. So you can move from self-publishing to traditional publishing. You can be a hybrid. It just, if a book sells like 3 copies and then an agent comes and looks at it, they might be like, yeah, I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
But if they see something in your work and they think you have talent, they might still take you on and nurture you over a number of years before you then get, another deal. I don't know if it'd be under the same name or a pen name. That's kind of, I've not heard of anybody who's done that and then come with a separate name. So it's there are hybrids, and you can move across from self-publishing for sure. Yeah, so I definitely that's nice to hear, because it's good to have options for sure. So I wanted to, you were talking about the fantasy, I don't know why this made me think of this. Just certain genres that I've heard might not do so well in traditional publishing might be thriving in self-publishing. And so if you've written a book that maybe just isn't right for the market at the time traditionally, it might be perfect for self-publishing. And so I think it's great to look at your story. And I mean, some romance authors are just doing way better in self-publishing than they probably might be doing in traditional publishing, because they're just killing it. So definitely depends on your genre too. Yeah, and if you think about 50 Shades, she wrote that as fan fiction.
That's what I heard.
Fan fiction for the
Twilight.
The Twilight books. And I'm like, I don't quite get how it anyway, but then based upon their rabid success, then they got traditionally published in movies. And
just got to file that serial number off.
It's just one of those things that I guess if she tried to go traditional publishing to begin with, they probably would have gone, I'm not really sure about this, but because of their huge success on self-publishing.
For sure. But I definitely think that if you want to be traditionally published, like self-publishing that book's probably not your best. Like I wouldn't bank on that. Like is what I've heard a lot of the times. And I think just like knowing that the chances of you like breaking out huge as a self-published author for your first book is just like very, very low. Like because it's, even if it's an amazing book and it's super high concept or whatever it is, like if you don't have the visibility, like it might just not catch on. Like maybe
Yes.
the quality is there, but you just don't have the visibility. And so I think if your dream is to be traditionally published and that's what you want, like self-publishing is not a shortcut. And it's way too much work to be a shortcut. So
yeah, it shouldn't. I don't think self-publishing should be a knee-jerk reaction if you get rejected from traditional publishing. Like, well, they don't know what they talk about, I'll show you. And I'm like, it might be that the market is there in self-publishing for the book, I don't know. But if the quality isn't there and they just kind of said it's not right, I mean, the difficulty is agents are already have their own opinions. Like someone will say, this book isn't right for me, I can't champion it. But you go to the next agent and they go, I love it, this is exactly my cup of tea. And then they can try and launch it. So it's so difficult. Well, there isn't that the same barrier in self-publishing. You just take it to an editor and say, right, edit my book. They're not going to be like, I don't want to edit because it's not really my book. Like, or like, I don't think it's going to sell very well, I'm not going to edit it. They're not going to do that. They'll be like, hang on, you're paying my mortgage, so yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it.
Exactly, which is why I mean, I think a big piece of advice I'd give to people that want to self-publish is don't self-publish your very first book ever. Like it might be amazing, but I think some people that do really well on their first book when they're doing traditional publishing, it makes it through all those checkpoints. And so you know, it has something, someone saw something in it. But since you don't have those barriers in self-publishing, you might publish your first book thinking it's great, and then you'll look back on it a few years later after you have more experience and you're like, oh wow, like I don't want that on my brand. Like and so and so I think a good way to avoid that, generally speaking, I think, you know, it depends on who you are, but I just wouldn't recommend self-publishing your first book. I would write at least, like I self-published my second book, but I had written those two books so many times. And so I felt like I had learned, and I'd written a novella and some other things on the side that were not full-length novels. And so I felt like I had some more confidence in it. But I mean, if you can, just write a few books, like figure out your voice, figure out your style, like settle into what kind of writer you are, and then, you know, seek out self-publishing, because there's no one's going to tell you like, that's not going to sell, don't do that. Like they're going to hand you your services, and then you're going to hand them your money, and then you'll see how it goes. So it is. I think both methods have their challenges. They're both very, very tough. There are those people that do okay on their first book, and then it's a case of, well, you know, we hope it does better next time, whether it's traditional or self-publishing. It's just a case of, you've got to build your audience, you've got to grow over time. But the other thing is, say it's not your first book that you've written, but the first book that is published is brilliant and it does really well, and it is a standalone. People are going to go to the shelf, go online and be like, where's the next one? This is what I always say, that writing, you know, and being published isn't one book, it's a body of work either way. People are like, that's awesome, do another one. And you're like, okay. So it's, you've got to do it again. I mean, there are very few people who've written one book and then quit, or they've just lived off the royalties forever and never did anything. Like the only one I can really think of is like Harper Lee wrote To Kill a Mockingbird. And then that was in school and everybody talked about it and wrote about it. And then she put out like 50 years later, Go Kill a Watchman or whatever it was. And like, but that was it. She's like one of the exceptions. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I was trying to think, I had a thought. Just that I think that maybe the pressures when you're traditionally publishing and your first book did do well, or maybe it did okay, and it's just that pressure to keep doing well. Because from people I've talked to, like your career could start out really great, but if you can't keep writing great books, like it's not like you break in and then it guarantees you a career. And so I can imagine that pressure to write a better book than your last book, or as good a book as your last book, can be as much as the pressure to have as polished of a book as traditional authors do when you're self-publishing. And so I think there's going to be crazy pressure each way you go. It's just, what kind of pressure do you want?
Pressure you put on yourself, or pressure from your editor, your agent, and your readers. Both ways. It's the readers saying, that was great, where's the next one? I want it to be as good, if not better. And that's pressure you feed back on yourself to be like, okay, I've got to work extra hard on this one. I've got to make this one really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so if your first series does okay, then your second series with traditional publishing, they won't offer you as much in the advance. Like some people have a misconception of like, you do a trilogy and it just does okay. The publisher's not going to be like, nope, I don't want to deal with you ever again. They might say, it didn't do what we expected, but we like to keep working with you. But this time, instead of, I don't know, $100,000, this time we're going to give you 50 for your advance. That's what they might sort of do. And if that did okay, they might offer you another 50, or if it didn't do great, they might say, right, this time it's going to be 25 or 30. And it's, I mean, some people have been dropped by publishers after the first series, some after the second. You know, it really depends. As difficult as it is to get traditionally published, I think it's harder to stay traditionally published.
Yeah, honestly, I could totally see that, because with self-publishing, like, I don't know that your past necessarily is held against you as much. Not that necessarily that it's always held against you in traditional publishing, but if you publish a few not so great books in the beginning, I mean, you can just take them down and then let a few years pass, and then, you know, come out with something great and just keep building and keep publishing. And if you keep at it long enough, you might find great success. And yeah, so I definitely think maybe there's more work on the front end with self-publishing, in that, you know, you're putting in more hours with actually publishing, whereas in traditional publishing, you're dealing with the rejection, you're submitting to agents, and you're dealing with all that stuff. But then, you know, when you get published, I'm sure that the pressure just mounts the longer that you're in and you're trying to keep up. And with self-publishing, maybe, I mean, I don't know, because I haven't been self-published very long, but maybe you get into a groove and you know, kind of figure out what works and what doesn't, and then maybe it's easier. I don't know. So just interesting to think about.
Well, yeah, I mean, you've got to keep doing your research though, because things keep changing, surely, with like Amazon and marketing and Instagram and promotion. I mean, is that changing like every few months and you just have to keep on top of it?
Yeah, I don't know. I always admire those people that can keep a really close ear to the ground with the market and trends and all of that. I read a lot, but I don't know, maybe I'm just not so good at spotting the trends as much. I think it's something you can learn to do. It's not definitely something that doesn't come naturally to me. And so it's definitely something that you should learn, whatever publishing route you go, is learning how to keep up with things. So
yeah, the market moves so quickly, and it's also crowded as a lot. You know, there's so many fantasy and other genre books being published and self-published every year.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, it's definitely hard to cut through the noise. So
but you've got to do it yourself. I guess that's the difference. It's all on you to do the PR, do the marketing, do the social media posts.
Yeah, and I think it's good to know that if that's not something, like, because you're still going to be marketing when you're traditionally published, but for me, like, if I was going to try to, you know, take some time and pursue traditional publishing, I think one of the main reasons is because I don't want to have to format my own book, or, you know, I don't want to have to do these like mechanical parts of things, like, because you're still going to want to be on social media, and you're still going to want to have a website, and you're still going to want to do some of your own marketing. But it's just that, like, one of the benefits is that it's not all on you, and that that's not the only thing you've got going for you is your social media account. And so yeah, I think that's a reason to consider that, is there are certain things you don't have to do, and that can be great, and there's other things that you do have to do and they suck.
So either way, I think the conclusion is it's a lot of hard work. It's just finding what you're comfortable doing, finding the hours. That's the other thing. If you've got the hours and you've got the time and you've got the money to pursue one or the other, it's really up to the individual to decide, I guess.
Yeah, and I think something I've heard too is that most people can't, you know, live off of their money as a traditionally published author. But if you self-publish, that's way more of an option. You could totally be full-time as a self-published author, but I don't think it's any more likely on that end. I think it's going to be an uphill battle either way, and you're just as likely to make a full-time living off of traditional versus self. Like, I mean, I don't know. I can't make that blanket statement because I'm sure it's different for everybody, but I don't know.
I think you're right. I think you're right.
So
Yeah.
always have a backup plan, always have another source of income.
You've got to, for both. This is it. This is why, people saying, oh, it's easy to self-publish and I do it full time now. And in 3 years I was writing all the time. I'm like, a very small percentage, yeah, can do it.
Yeah.
Same with traditional publishing. The rest, no, two-person household with jobs. You write part-time, you work, you write in the evenings. That's kind of how it is.
Absolutely. I watched this video that Brandon Sanderson had posted. I think it was a long time ago I posted, but I really liked how he talked about how he had a friend that went into engineering, and it was this really difficult degree that he was going through, and he was like coming home being like, I got 60% on my tests, and he was like, that's awful, and he's like, no, that was highest in the class, like, and it's this whole thing, and he was like, if they told those people in that that degree, that program, that okay, 10 of you out of the 100 of you or the 50 of you or whatever it is will make a living at this and we'll get a full-time job off of this, but the rest of you won't, but you're going to put in all this work and you're going to do all these things, but only 10 of you are going to make it. A lot of them would probably be like, nope, I'm good, I'm going to go do something else. And so it's just interesting how with writing, that's how it is. Like, you could put in as much work as the person next to you could put in so many hours, and it just might not happen for you. And I love what he talks about if you're going to write, like, you should remember that it's okay to just write for yourself, and it's okay to write because it's good for you and write because you love it. And if you want to be published, that's great, like, pursue that. But if it doesn't make you a living, that doesn't mean you haven't succeeded as a writer. That doesn't mean you're not a good writer. And so yeah, I just thought that was interesting. I liked that.
Yeah, he's right. It's we all start writing not for the plan to get rich, but we write with the thing because we like the process. We like writing, we like doing it. I mean, some people say I like the process of having written, and I don't get that. I'm like, if you don't like writing, why are you doing it? Like, oh, I'm like, when it's done, I can come back and edit it. I'm like, I actually like the doing part, the writing it, the creating it, the coming up with the ideas, and oh, brilliant. And then I rattle it down, or that thing of I plan my books too, but I have gaps so that when I get to a scene, something will just come into my brain. I'll write it down and go, oh, that's interesting. What's that? And I don't know, but I explore it. And I love that. It's this creative jumps. But if you don't enjoy writing, I'm like, why are you a writer?
Yeah, it's not worth it if you don't like doing it.
You don't have to like, oh, I must suffer for my art. I'm like, no, you don't.
Yeah.
You can enjoy what you do in any job. And if you don't like writing, don't be a writer. No one's forcing you to do it.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I like what you said about those little creative jumps. I definitely don't plan out my characters. I tried to plan out my characters when I was first writing, and then they just are these stale, one-dimensional characters that are terrible. And so I feel like it always works better for me to figure them out as I go, and then I'm like, oh, like, this is so great, and then the character arcs like come together, and then that's always like a fun part for me. And like those little rushes of, oh, it's like coming together, it's like, and you get to just, yeah, it's fun. And if you don't find that fun, then there's no point.
But there again, interesting what you say. So you found what works for you. You found that, planning it. I know some people plan their books really detailed and then they just start going. Some people have an idea in their mind and they know roughly the ending, and they just work towards it, and it always works out for them because that's their approach. I tried it once. I wrote one novel where I had a vague idea and I just wrote the whole thing. It was awful. I never showed it to anybody. I never kind of tried to get an agent with it. It was just awful. I'm like, no way. Now I know this does not work for me. So
yes, and that's the thing about like writing advice on YouTube and just anywhere. And because when you come into publishing advice, you're going to run into writing advice too. And I think there's some people that are very prescriptive. They're going to say, this is how you should write a book. And just knowing that, like, that's an option, that you can totally try that. But if it doesn't work for you, that doesn't mean that you're a bad writer or that it's wrong for you. Like, finding what works, like, there's just a million ways to write a book, and finding what's best for you is a process. And that's why I always say, like, try to write a few books before you maybe go into self-publishing, because like, I love what Jim Butcher says about how he, with his Dresden Files series, which I love.
One of my favorite series ever. Love
really?
them.
Oh my gosh, it's my favorite series ever.
I met him. He came to the UK. Sidetrack for anybody watching this. We'll talk about Jim Butcher for a minute.
Okay.
So he came to UK convention once about 4 years ago now, and I've been waiting for him to come for years and years and years, and he finally came over, and I'm like, yay! And I went along and got my copy of Cold Days, or no, Changes. I got Changes signed. I'm like, if any book I'm going to get signed, it's going to be Changes.
Yeah,
yeah. And he came over, and I went to all his talks. I asked him some questions, and he's like, at that point, he was talking about doing a spin-off, but he hadn't said what it was. And so I suggested and said, is it this? And he went, no, but I hadn't thought about that. I'm like, and he's like, I'm not doing that. Oh, damn it.
Yeah.
Never mind. Anyway, but yeah, that's Jim Butcher. Cool. Good. So what was he saying about Dresden?
Just that he felt like his first few books of the Dresden Files were good, but he really like discovered like his voice and his style as a writer come like the third and the fourth book, which is funny because I tell a lot of people when they get into Dresden Files, if they're like, oh yeah, I read the first one and it's not so great, I'm like, no, like you gotta keep going, because like just get into the third and fourth and then you can't stop because it's so great. And then I always tell people, I'm like, Changes is my favorite book, and I know that it's like the 12th million book in the series, but you have to get there because it's so worth it. But anyways, yeah, just that sometimes it takes a few books to get your voice. And obviously he got the first Dresden Files published, so it's a great book, but if even he's saying like it takes some time to like find your rhythm and find your voice and find who you are as a writer. I think it's great if you're self-publishing to try to find that out maybe first before you get into publishing, and not necessarily like, find your path, but I mean, that's always what I recommend.
Because he's been writing the Dresden Files for 20 years now. And if you go look, if he goes back and looks at Stormfront, I'm sure there's things he would change now and he could tweak them and all the rest of it. I mean, the only person I know who's done this is Stephen King. So on the Dark Tower books, which I've got, I read The Gunslinger years and years ago, was the first one. And then he went on and he's written the rest over the course of his career. But he's gone back, re-edited that first one and re-released it with some changes and extra material.
Oh,
so,
wow.
If Stephen King goes, yeah, I think I'm going to tweak that, and do it, he can get away with doing it. But most people with traditional publishing, you can't. It's out. That's it. I mean,
you've made your bed.
Finding his voice for Jim Butcher over 20 years, totally get it. But he's done it in public. He's had people, find his work and work through it. We've been with him for 20 years, watching this series grow, watching him grow as a writer. So
yeah,
it's different.
Definitely.
Oh wow. Well, I'm not sure we've come to any great conclusions, but
I know. I'm sorry. It's very ambiguous, but I guess that's how it is.
No, I think it was good. I think we've explored both sides, traditional and self-publishing, and it's finding what's right for you. It's finding if you've got the commitment and the time to do either, really, because it's going to be hard, whatever you do. And the odds of being that smash success in traditional or self-publishing is very small again. And as I've said in another one, you're not going to be a millionaire off either.
Yes.
Off either. It's just not going to happen. People who say that, they're lying to you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Check if they're selling something.
What are they offering you? A great deal and this great series that they're going to do and make you an instant success overnight? I'm like, really?
For their courses,
What are they offering you? Yeah. Always be asking questions.
Yeah. I think it's good to just see what they've done, if they're successful or not, and how much they've done, even if they're not successful. So.
Yeah. Always ask questions. Definitely. Well, thank you for coming on and sharing your story about self-publishing. And
thanks for having me.
You're welcome. You're very welcome. And I'll put some links down below to your books and to all your social media and stuff. So I'll encourage people to go and follow you and find you and find your books and keep an eye out for book 3 in the future.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Good night, everyone.
All right. We'll see ya.
Bye.